Lena and Marcus had always loved Halloween, but this year, something followed them home, something that didn't belong in the world of living. The fog swallowed the streets, shadows whispered secrets only they could hear, and every reflection showed eyes that weren't theirs. By the time they realized the truth, it was too late. Whatever haunted that night had already marked them. I always loved Halloween, but this year felt different. The streets were quieter than usual, almost unnaturally so, and a thick fog clung to the sidewalks and streetlights, curling like icy fingers around everything it touched. Even the houses I passed seemed wrong, too still, their windows dark except for the faint flicker of candlelight that barely pierced the gloom. I told myself it was just Halloween decorations, just people being cautious, but the feeling in my chest wouldn't let me lie. Something in the air was heavy, almost alive, and it pressed against me as I walked. I clutched my pumpkin bucket, feeling its plastic surface slick with cold sweat. Each step I took seemed louder than it should have been, echoing too sharply in the quiet street. The farther I went, the thicker the fog became, swallowing familiar shapes and making even the street lamps look like ghostly towers reaching down from the sky. I tried to shake the unease, pretending to be brave, pretending it was all in my head, but then I saw it, a house at the end of the street that I had never noticed before. It was old, far older than the others, with peeling paint, broken shutters, and an air of decay that made the fog seem even heavier around it. Its windows were black, opaque, reflecting nothing, and the front door hung slightly ajar, swinging slowly even though the air was still. A smell drifted out as I approached, subtle at first, then unmistakable. The stench of rot and something metallic, something that made my stomach churn and my skin crawl. My instincts screamed at me to turn away, yet curiosity, the kind that often gets you into trouble, forced me forward. On the porch, the dust-covered boards bore a message, scrawled unevenly with what looked like a shaky hand. "Don't come in." My heart pounded. My hand shook, but I stepped closer anyway, drawn to the darkness like a moth to a flame. The door creaked as I pushed it open, revealing a hallway dimly lit by a single swinging light bulb that cast more shadows than it illuminated. The floorboards groaned under my weight, and the air inside was colder than it should have been, damp with the scent of mildew and decay. As I moved down the hall, my eyes fell on the walls. Hundreds of photographs hung in mismatched frames, all of children in Halloween costumes. At first, I felt a strange nostalgia, a bittersweet pang of memory, but then my stomach dropped. Every child's eyes had been scratched out, leaving black, empty voids that seemed to stare straight through me. Panic prickled along my spine, but before I could turn to leave, I heard it. A whisper, faint, almost inaudible, curling around my ears like smoke. I spun around, expecting someone behind me, but the hallway was empty. The door I had entered slammed shut with a force that rattled the walls, trapping me inside. My breath came in short, sharp bursts, and every instinct in me screamed to run, to escape. But the darkness seemed to close in from all sides, alive and hungry. And then, from the corner of the hallway, I felt it. A touch, cold and fleeting, brushing against my shoulder, and a voice that didn't belong to any living thing whispered directly into my mind. "Welcome. We've been waiting." Panic gripped me as I pressed my hands against the door, but it wouldn't budge. The wood was cold, unyielding, as if it had fused with the house itself. I slammed my fists, yelled, but my voice refused to carry beyond my own ears. It was as if the house swallowed sound, leaving only the rapid beating of my own heart to remind me that I was still alive. And then the whispers returned, louder this time, circling me, threading around my mind like invisible fingers. I could almost understand them, words half-formed, teasing at the edge of comprehension, but every meaning slipped away before I could grasp it. I stumbled forward, my hands trailing along the walls. Every step felt heavier than the last, as if the house was resisting my movement. The hallway stretched endlessly, bending in ways that made no sense. Doors appeared where none should be, corners twisted impossibly, and the air grew colder, more oppressive with each breath. Shadows pooled in the corners, stretching and writhing as though they were alive and watching me, waiting for the moment I faltered. I entered a room and froze. The floor was covered in old toys, some broken, some crawling with insects. On a small table, half-eaten candy lay in a rotting heap, the sweet smell mingling with decay to make my stomach heave. And on the walls, written deep into the plaster, were words scrawled in what I could only assume was blood. "We've been waiting for you." My heart pounded violently, as if it wanted to escape my chest. The shadows seemed to pulse in time with it, growing darker, more oppressive. Then I saw them. Faces pressed to the glass of the windows, dozens of children, their smiles frozen in unnatural grins, their eyes black pits that seemed to pierce through me. I tried to scream, to run, but my legs refused to obey. Slowly, deliberately, the faces turned their gaze toward me, unblinking, and I felt their attention like icy hands sliding over my skin. I stumbled backward, almost tripping over a broken toy, and the shadows shifted, moving faster now, circling me. Something shifted behind me, a movement so subtle I barely noticed it at first. A door in the corner creaked open. I dared not look. But the air grew colder, heavier, filled with the scent of decay and whispers that now felt like urgent hissing. My name, repeated over and over. I couldn't understand how it was possible, but every whisper struck my mind with the clarity of a scream. I bolted for the hallway, my hands scraping against walls that seemed to stretch further than before, twisting in ways that made my stomach drop. The footsteps began then, slow, deliberate, echoing off walls that shouldn't exist. They weren't my own. Something was following me, something patient, something that knew I couldn't escape. I reached another room, and the light flickered on, revealing a scene I would never forget. Mirrors lined the walls, reflecting not just me, but shadowed shapes moving behind me, shapes I couldn't identify, shapes that shouldn't exist. And in the center, standing just out of reach, was a small figure, pale and still, its eyes black and endless, staring at me with an intensity that burned through my skull. My vision blurred and my knees buckled, sending me to the floor, helpless, as the whispers escalated into a chorus of voices, all chanting my name. I scrambled to my feet, heart hammering, and forced myself toward the stairs, desperate for any escape. The steps creaked beneath me, but they seemed endless, stretching farther than they should. The darkness at the top swallowed the light, and a chill clung to me, seeping into my bones. Every instinct screamed to turn back, yet some dark curiosity drove me forward, whispering that if I faced whatever was here, I might survive. The upper hallway was narrow and oppressive. Doors lined each side, some slightly open, some closed, all seeming to breathe with a life of their own. The air smelled faintly of decay and damp wood, mixed with something sweeter, almost like rotting candy. I tried one door. Inside was a nursery, frozen in time. Small cradles rocked gently, though no breeze stirred the air. Dolls lay scattered across the floor, faces chipped, eyes cracked. And in each cradle, a child, or something that had been a child, slept unnaturally still. I blinked, and their heads slowly turned toward me, moving in unison. Their eyes glimmered black, reflecting nothing, staring directly at me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't scream. My feet felt glued to the floor as the whispers rose into a chant, a chorus of tiny, cold voices echoing in the room. I stumbled back, and the door slammed shut behind me. My own reflection flickered in a cracked mirror, showing a face that seemed wrong, too pale, eyes hollow and empty, my expression frozen in terror. I bolted from the room, the hallway bending in ways that made no sense. I passed doors that led to more nurseries, more rooms filled with photographs, toys, and broken candy. The walls seemed to pulse, breathing in time with my own panic. I turned a corner and froze. At the end of the hall was a closet door, slightly ajar. A dark shape lurked inside, crawling slowly toward me. I couldn't make out a face, but I could feel it watching, sensing my fear. I ran, ignoring everything, until the floor beneath me gave way. I plunged into darkness, the air rushing from my lungs, the impact knocking the breath out of me. I landed on a cold, damp floor, and when I looked up, I realized I was in the basement. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with old photographs, each one showing children in costumes, faces frozen in smiles, eyes black and lifeless. My stomach churned as I walked among them. Then I froze. One photograph was different. It was recent, too recent, and the face staring back at me was mine. A chill ran down my spine, and I felt the shadows in the room shift. Whispers circled my head, faster now, urgent, demanding. I could feel them drawing closer, closer than before. The basement seemed endless, walls stretching and bending impossibly, trapping me in its darkness. And then I saw it. A small, shadowed figure at the far end, barely visible, crawling toward me. Its movements were slow, deliberate, inhuman. Its eyes glinted black in the dim light, and I realized with a sinking horror that this was no child. The walls around me seemed to breathe, pulsing with the whispers and the soft shuffle of the figure advancing. My legs trembled, my mind screamed, and yet I couldn't tear my gaze away. The figure paused, then lifted its head slightly, and I saw a faint smile stretch across its shadowed face. It moved again, faster now, gliding over the ground, and I understood. I was not just trapped. I was being chosen. I backed away, my hands trembling as the shadowed figure advanced, its slow, deliberate movement sending chills racing through my spine. The basement walls seemed to contract around me, pressing closer with every heartbeat. I stumbled over the photographs, scattering them, and felt the whispers twist into something sharper, angrier, louder. They were no longer just voices. They were demands, pulling at my mind, bending my thoughts until I felt my own identity slipping. I pressed myself against the far wall, eyes darting around for anything I could use, anything to stop what was coming. The air was thick, suffocating, and every breath burned my lungs. The shadows along the walls began to move on their own, stretching toward me, reaching, clawing. The photographs I had knocked over slid across the floor on their own, circling me like predators, each one showing children I recognized from news reports, missing for years, their eyes hollow, faces frozen in terror. The figure reached the center of the basement, and I saw it fully now. Taller than any child, its form was cloaked in darkness that seemed to writhe and twist, as if it had substance but no shape. It moved toward me with a slow inevitability that made my blood run cold. I wanted to scream, to run, to fight, but my legs refused to obey. My mind reeled with a horrifying thought. This thing had waited for me, watched me, and now it was here to claim me. I could feel its gaze burning into my skull, its voice a whisper in my mind, speaking words I understood perfectly, though I could not repeat them aloud. Join us. Always. The shadows along the walls shifted again, forming shapes of children. Their hollow eyes locked on me, mouths opening in silent screams. The figure stretched out a hand, and I felt an invisible weight pressing down on me, pushing me to the floor. Every instinct screamed that this was the end, that I was about to be absorbed into the darkness that had claimed every other child before me. I closed my eyes, bracing for the inevitability, but when I opened them again, I was standing in the street outside. The fog rolled lazily around me, the houses quiet and normal, the streets seemingly abandoned. Relief washed over me, and I laughed shakily, telling myself I had imagined it all. The chill in my bones faded slightly, though a persistent prickle of unease remained. I looked back to see the house, but it was gone. Where it had stood, there was nothing but an empty lot, overgrown with weeds. I tried to tell myself it was over, that the horrors were behind me, but a nagging thought gnawed at the edges of my mind. When I glanced into a puddle on the sidewalk, my reflection rippled unnaturally. My eyes, they weren't my own. Blackened, hollow, empty. The chill returned, stronger this time, crawling up my spine. I could feel it, the presence, patient and waiting, still there, just beyond the fog, just beyond my reach. And then I heard the faintest whisper, carried on the cold night air, almost tender, almost familiar. It spoke my name. I ran. I ran, heart hammering, not daring to look back. The street was empty, fog curling around the streetlights like ghostly fingers. But the feeling of being watched never left. My hands shook. My breath came in ragged gasps. And yet no matter how fast I ran, I couldn't shake the sense that something, someone, was following me. Each shadow seemed heavier than it should be, each corner darker, more oppressive. Even when I reached my front door and slammed it shut behind me, locking it, turning every bolt I could find, the sense of dread remained. Nights passed, and I tried to convince myself it had all been a hallucination, a trick of the fog and my imagination. But sleep offered no relief. Each time I closed my eyes, the whispers returned, soft at first, teasing, and then insistent, circling my mind like vultures. I saw the faces of the children, their black eyes fixed on me, their mouths opening in silent screams. Mirrors in my home betrayed me. My reflection would sometimes pause, staring a moment too long, my eyes darker than they should have been, and sometimes something moved behind me that I didn't recognize. I stopped leaving the house. The world outside became secondary to the growing terror inside. I covered mirrors, locked doors, avoided the creaking floorboards that now seemed to groan even when I wasn't moving. But the whispers didn't care. They found me, no matter where I hid. They were patient, endless, waiting for me to falter, to slip, to finally acknowledge them. I could feel it. The shadowed figure, the thing from the basement, still watching, still moving in the spaces between reality and nightmare. Then, one evening, a package appeared at my doorstep. No sender, no markings, just a small carved pumpkin identical to the one I had carried that night. My hands trembled as I lifted the lid, half expecting something to crawl out. Inside was a photograph. I froze. The image was recent, impossibly so, and it showed me in costume smiling for the camera. But my eyes, they were hollow, black as midnight, reflecting nothing, staring at me with a depth of emptiness that made my stomach churn. A whisper slithered into my mind, soft but insistent. "You belong to us now." I dropped the pumpkin. It rolled across the floor, but the photograph remained, as if the air itself was holding it in place, refusing to let me escape. I could feel the weight of countless eyes upon me, the shadows in every corner shifting, moving closer, circling, patient. I realized then that the house, the children, the figure in the basement, it was never about escape. It was about acknowledgement. About accepting that I had been marked, chosen, trapped. I tried to destroy the photograph, tried to throw it into the fireplace, but it refused to burn. The whispers rose into a chorus of voices, chanting my name, and the shadows stretched along the walls, forming shapes I could no longer bear to see. I sank to the floor, clutching my head, and I understood. This was permanent. The world I knew, the life I thought I had, was gone. I had been consumed, even outside the house, and yet just when I thought the darkness would take me completely, the whispers paused, leaving a silence that was more terrifying than any sound. I dared to look up. The shadows had receded, for now. But in the corner of the room, barely visible, I saw a figure waiting, patient, smiling, and I realized the truth. It was not over. It would never be over.